Hi Hope City, it's Phil here, and we're back with more from Joshua today. We're going to continue our conversation about returning to mission. Today's passage is about how God prepares His people for mission. And in this passage, we find that the Israelites are getting ready to cross the Jordan River and enter the land that God has promised to give them. And they know that as soon as they cross the Jordan, as soon as they enter into this land, that they will be actively engaged in battle for their very survival. And so my question for us as we read this passage is this: how do you prepare for something like that? How do you prepare for the kind of challenge and the kind of conflict and the kind of pushback that they're going to experience? And maybe as we think about returning and joining God in mission, maybe our question is this: how do you and I prepare to join God in mission, which involves being actively engaged in people's lives, in loving them and walking with them and looking for opportunities to share Jesus with them? And sometimes that's the hard thing, is when we share Jesus with them, is that we will get pushback. We will experience rejection or even ridicule. How do we prepare to share Jesus with others in this time, in this culture, because God is calling us to it? And here's the thing, I think preparation matters, and this passage that we read in Joshua is about how God prepares His people for this mission. Preparation matters because it can either set us up for success or it can set us up for failure. I see this in my son Micah. Right now, he is so into fishing right now, and I'm going to let you know, I know nothing about fishing. My dad didn't teach me about fishing, so he's learning fishing from his friends, and they go down to the creek and they fish, and I learned something from the local fishing store where we got the rods from, and they try to teach us what they can. But what I'm really learning about fishing is that it involves an incredible amount of preparation. You see, the night before Micah and I headed out to fish together for the first time, we spent a whole bunch of time preparing. We were tying, weights and bobbers and swivels and hooks onto our line, and then we spent time preparing our bait. And up until this point, we've spent lots of time preparing, but we haven't spent a lot of time catching. So we're still figuring out what this fishing thing is all about. But we really believe that, the time we spend preparing is supposed to help us get to the actual catching of the fish. We spend all this time before we actually get to the pond because preparation matters. And so my question for us as we look at this passage, as we think about our calling to join God in mission, is this: what does preparation for mission look like? And I really think that as we look at this passage, we're going to begin to see three things that preparation involves. And the first is this: it's consecration. You see, preparation begins with consecration. You see, returning to mission begins when we give our lives to God for His purpose and for His mission. Okay, it begins with consecration. Going to get into that in a little bit. And consecration will actually lead us into the second stage of preparation, which is a posture of anticipation. Returning to mission is about eagerly anticipating God to work in ways that are beyond our ability, beyond our power, beyond our influence, in order to make Jesus known. And then thirdly, the word that I want us to come around, after we talk about consecration, after we talk about anticipation, is this word confirmation. You see, God sends us into mission with the confirmation of His presence. You see, for us as a church, returning to mission is actually sustained by a real experience of God's presence with us. A real experience for us collectively as a church, a real experience for you and I individually as well, as we join Him in this calling. I want to begin by talking about consecration. I want to start by talking about how returning to mission begins when we give our lives to God for His purpose and for His mission. And for that, I think I really need to unpack the question, what does it mean for us to consecrate ourselves? You see, consecrating ourselves simply means rededicating ourselves to God and to His purpose and to His mission again. Consecrating ourselves means that we embrace our call to be His instruments for His purpose. You see, consecration simply means that we recognize that we are not our own, but that we respond to that recognition by telling God, actually, I am yours. Do what you want with me. You see, look at Joshua 3 verse 5. God commands His people, He says, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. You see, when it comes to mission and when it comes to applying what this looks like, the question I think we need to consider is this: how do we consecrate ourselves to God as we return to His mission? What do we consider ours that we need to actually give back to God for His will and His purpose? You see, what does rededicating ourselves to God look like? When we look at the passage here, we see that the Israelites, their form of consecration involved bathing. They would bathe. They would clean their bodies. Because what they're recognizing and what they're affirming, what they're giving back to God is the reality that their bodies, their lives belong to God and for His purpose. That's why they would bathe. They would then wash their clothes, right? They would do some laundry. But this wasn't just any laundry. This was laundry in which they recognized that their identity, sometimes which is communicated through their clothing, and their possessions, again, whether you are wealthy or not, they all had clothes. What they owned, their identity and their possessions, all belong to God and for His purpose. And then for the Israelites, consecration even involved abstaining from sex. You see, what I think they were trying to come around, put their hearts and their minds around, is this idea, this reality that their desires, the very things that drive them, the very things that they hunger for, they are submitting to God for His purposes. And so for us, I think this is more than just doing some laundry or taking a bath or saying, hey, no sex, right? I think this involves so much more than that, because for us, the question is, what are we giving back to God that He's given to us so that it could be for His purpose and for His mission? We're saying, this is yours. And maybe for us, when we begin to consecrate ourselves to God for His mission and for His purpose, we are giving to Him our time, our schedule, our rhythm of life, and we're saying, our time is yours. Who I spend my time with, what I spend my time on is yours. Do with it what you wish. Or perhaps it's our energy, what we focus on, who we focus on. Or maybe it's our relationships. Maybe the question we really need to ask as we talk about consecration is this: do we have any openings in our social networks for new people, or to go deeper with the existing people who are already there, or are things too full? Maybe what relationships do we possibly need to press pause on or say no to so that we can engage in fresh, new relationships for the sake of sharing Jesus with them? And finally, our resources. One of the biggest things that actually has a hold on us is the stuff that we own, is the money that we make. And I think one of the things that we don't recognize that is, if this is all from God and we are to be stewards of this, one of the things that we need to do is say, God, do with what you've given me what you wish. Who do you want me to bless? Who do you want me to serve? Who can I send a book to? Who can I send flowers to in this moment of their difficulty or their grief? Or who can I come alongside and maybe provide groceries for? Because this would be an important way to just show Jesus and His love to them in this moment. And so our resources, our time, our work, our friendship, our energy, I think all of these things are things that we value and things that we've been given, and to consecrate ourselves means to simply give these back to God. And I sometimes think that this involves even our goals and our dreams for ourselves and for our children, and for maybe even our church. What are we giving back to God? How do we consecrate ourselves to God as we return to His mission? What do we consider ours that we need to give back to God for His will and for His purposes? And so for us as a church and for us as followers of Jesus, returning to mission begins with consecration. It begins with us saying, Jesus, my life is not my own. It is yours. It is for your purpose and for your mission. And you see, when we start to give our lives to God, something happens. We begin to live out of a posture of anticipation. You know, this is the second thing. Returning to mission is actually about us eagerly anticipating God to work in ways that are so far beyond our ability, our power, and our influence to make Jesus known. You see, the passage that follows up, the second half of verse 5 is this: you need to consecrate yourselves because tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And I think what Joshua is saying is God is going to do amazing things, not just tomorrow, but the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that, until His kingdom comes on earth as it is in heaven. And so returning to mission is about us giving God our lives, our time, our energy, our schedule, and then we're expecting Him to do something amazing with it that we couldn't do on our own. We're expecting Him to open doors and to give us opportunities with people that maybe we would have never anticipated having an opportunity to share Jesus with. You see, what we're hoping for is for God to do something that is so far beyond what we could do on our own, with our own relationships and with our own ability to cultivate, whether it's opportunities to share. We expect God to prepare these opportunities when we pray for these opportunities. When we take our kids to the park and we pray for opportunities to connect with people. Don't be surprised when God actually brings people to you. And when God brings people to you who are not just interested in being friends with you, but have a need for Jesus as well. So the application for this as we talk about anticipation, as we return to mission, are we actually anticipating that God will do what only He can do? And so my question for us is this: what does missional anticipation actually look like? Because I think missional anticipation takes on a posture of prayer in our lives. Because if we can do it all ourselves, if we can make things happen on our own, and if we don't need God to show up, then we don't need to pray, we don't need to ask. If we don't need His goodness and His power to break through in the lives of our friends and our family, then we don't need to pray. What I'm going to tell you is that as I've grown as a follower of Jesus, as I've lived deeper into this over time, and as I've served more as a pastor and as a church planter, I am more convinced, more now than ever before in my life or in my work, that I can't do this on my own. That I need God, and I need God to do in my friends and in my family and in my church only what He can do. That it's not just about me trying harder or working smarter or finding the right strategies. It is really about me being on my knees praying for friends and family, praying for our church, and praying for opportunities that God will give us as we live into His mission for us. And so I often find that my time is shifting more and more towards me being on my knees, asking God to do what only He can do, beyond what I can do in our hearts and in our minds and in our church. And so my question for us is this: as we talk about and as we think about living into a posture of anticipation that God is going to do amazing things amongst us, the question is this: what are you praying for that only God can do? Who are you praying for? And what does it look like if God shows up and does amazing things? If He shows up in all of His goodness and all of His power, and He opens doors and He breaks through and He softens hearts, what will that look like? The last bit I want to share with you when it comes to preparation is this word confirmation. You see, returning to mission is actually sustained by a real experience of God's presence with us. Let me read from you Joshua 3:10-11 and verses 13 and verses 17. It reads like this: "This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap." This is verse 17. "The priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed crossing on dry ground." You see, when we return to mission, when we rededicate our lives to God, and when we begin to ask for Him to do for us more than what we can even imagine, do not be surprised when you face challenges and difficulties that tempt you to turn back. That's what the Jordan River symbolized for the people of Israel. That it would have been just easier to stay on this side of the Jordan instead of crossing over. That it's easier to stay on the sidelines than engaging in the battle. And I think it's right here, right at the beginning of our journey, that God will allow us to face challenges and allow us to face difficulties. And He does this not to discourage us from following Him in mission, but to actually give us a taste of His presence and His goodness and His power in our lives. He wants us to have a taste of that so that in the times of difficulty ahead, when we do face the real battle and the real challenges, we will look back and have a touchstone to rely on, something that we can go back to and realize this is what's real and this is what's sustaining me. You see, God wants to actually give us in those challenges and in those difficulties right at the beginning, He wants to give us a tangible experience of His love and His power. He wants to tell you and I, as we dedicate ourselves to mission, as we anticipate Him coming through, and all of a sudden, as we start praying for our friends and our family, we're going to experience challenges and difficulty in our personal life, in our work life, maybe in our family life. As we experience this, He wants us to know that He is with us, that He has our back, and that He will really come through for us. So that when we join Him in mission, and as we face things that look impossible, we will not look at those challenges and be dissuaded. But in fact, we will not only not turn around, but we will push forward because we have already walked through our Jordan on dry ground. I want to share with you that when Grace and I first started our journey to plant Hope City Church in 2012, they actually sent us to LA for a year and to kind of learn about church planting. And the very first month that we were in LA, my dad had a stroke while he was on a business trip, which also happened to be in LA. And at the time, it really seemed like providence that Grace and I were already there when this emergency took place. But a long story short, some of the things that my family and I discovered about my dad as we were taking care of him while he had the stroke, it put an incredible strain on our relationship with him. A strain that, looking back, we realized, and in the moment we realized we could not heal on our own without the presence, the power, and the work of God in our lives. During that year in LA when I was supposed to learn about church planting, I can't tell you right now exactly what I learned about planting, but I can tell you that up until that time, I have never felt God with me like that. That I've never felt God or experienced Him loving my messy family like that. That I've never felt Him teaching me and helping me to love and forgive like that. It's like God, during that year when I was in LA, supposed to be learning about church planting, He took that as a time to teach me about this word grace, about this word that I thought I knew so much about. And in fact, I had, up until that point in being a pastor, I had taught so much about. And He gave me an opportunity to truly live deep into it in all of its heartbreaking beauty and heartbreaking joy. You see, when we're called to live out God's mission, sometimes we doubt whether we will have heard right. We will doubt whether we are actually called. And I'm going to tell you the truth, as a pastor and as a church planter, these thoughts and these discouraging times, these doubts, they come to me all the time. Especially as I look at what's ahead and I realize this is so new and so difficult and so overwhelming and so impossible. I can't face this on my own. And I think for me, whenever I encounter some of these discouraging moments, whenever I doubt my call to mission, I always go back. I always go back to how strong His presence was with me and for my family while we were in LA, figuring out my relationship with my dad and helping him recover from the stroke. And in those moments when I remember and I recall tangibly how God was there for me, I know again, I'm reminded again that this is exactly the path that He has for me. You see, it's because I've been through my Jordan River, and I can tell you that He led me through on dry ground. And I think as you and I start to live out God's mission for us, that He will lead you through your Jordan, and He will lead you through your Jordan River on dry ground. That is what is going to sustain you and give you power and give you faith in Him as you learn to be on mission with Him and for Him. And so how do we apply this? Over the next couple weeks, as you are thinking about rededicating your life to God and His mission, I want you to consider and notice what challenges are emerging in your life, what difficulties are surfacing, because they will come. And I want us to notice them, and I want to challenge you not to run away, but I want you to lean in to the moment and lean in to asking God to show up for you like He showed up for Joshua and the Israelites as they crossed the Jordan River. As you rededicate your life to God and His mission, what challenges are emerging for you? You know, my prayer for us is that we would have an amazing time unpacking this in our microchurches, that we would be able to talk about consecration. We would be able to talk about how or we'd be able to talk about what it looks like for us to rededicate our lives to Jesus and His mission. That we would take an opportunity to talk about what we anticipate God to do, how we can pray not just on our own, but as a microchurch, we can pray for one another, and we can pray for the folks that we feel God is calling us to. Wouldn't it be amazing for us to see answered prayer and to celebrate that as a microchurch and maybe even together as a whole? And then finally, you know, for us to look at confirmation. Maybe some of you can share what that's looked like in your lives already. How as you've dedicated your life to Jesus, as you've crossed that Jordan, as you've walked through on dry ground, that can be such an encouragement to us, especially for those of us who are going through that difficult moment in the here and now. All right, have a great discussion in your microchurches. I'll see you next week.